You are listening to Be Amplified, the podcast with Bree and Tice, episode 52.
Hey Amplifiers, welcome to Be Amplified, the podcast. My name is Tice.
And I'm Bree Seeley. We are the co-founders of the Amplify Collective,
a movement aimed at radically disrupting how purpose-driven women connect and operate in the world.
Because we believe it's not just what you do, but who you are that matters.
Each week, join us for messages and interviews that will leave you feeling amplified and ready to change the world.
Let's do this. Welcome, Amplifiers, to yet another episode of Be Amplified, the podcast.
My name is Tice Sky.
And I'm Bree Seeley. I feel like we have to have, those old radio, like Casey Kasem, like all those old radio personalities that had
I don't.
Things.
No, I don't.
I feel like maybe we should start implementing that.
Oh, yeah?
And I'm Bree Seeley, coming to you live today from Seattle, Washington.
Actually, no. Yeah, I think you should. I really think but we're not live, so. And
right.
Tice Sky coming to you a long time ago.
Pre-recorded.
From Los Angeles, California. Welcome to Be Amplified, the podcast.
Woohoo!
We took a short break last week.
We did.
Because, let's be honest with why we took a break. We have been having some interesting dialogue and conversation around the subject of self-care. And so we couldn't record last week about the intro for Stephanie and this conversation because we could not figure out a way that we could both feel really good about talking about self-care.
So one of Tice and I's major secrets is we are one-take wonders. We don't re-record, we don't pause, we don't really edit. I mean, Tice will pull out a few pauses from our conversations, things like that, but we are like, we do it and it's done. And this was the first recording that we did where this will be our third attempt at this recording. And we deleted the first two attempts. Both of us got off and we're like, nope, that wasn't it.
Yeah.
So here we are. We gave ourselves a pause, as all good amplifiers do when things aren't feeling aligned. And we're back.
We're back. So we're going to attempt to do this time and actually not fuck it up.
Prayers for us that we make it through the next 20 minutes. But before we get there, quick invitation. We just launched tickets to one of our most epic dinner parties in Los Angeles, and we would like for you to sit at the table and join us.
You know, we didn't know what to do with our dinner parties for a long time because we were feeling so unfulfilled with doing them at restaurants. We just had such a bigger vision for what we could do with such an intimate conversation, and the women that show up are just so incredible. But we weren't sure if we were willing to do what it takes to make this be a private experience. But we did it last month, and it was so successful, and it was so relatively pain-free to put together. And the result was so divine that we decided we're going to do it again. We're going to do it again in August.
And we're super excited because we are partnering with the most beautiful venue. You'll hear more about Breather in between our section and our interview with Stephanie. They're an amazing company, so they are working with us to give us space. And I mean, let's be honest, Tice, the space is divine.
No, it's really beautiful, and I'm really excited about it. And we're going to have, food brought in, and we're going to have just a really, we have champagne, we have all types of water and non-alcoholic beverages. It's just a really beautiful curated experience. And I know that you're going to make some really meaningful conversations and connections. So if you're in LA, just go to our website, theamplifycollective.com, and the events tab, and you'll see all of our upcoming events, including our upcoming dinner party. I believe we have like 17 spots available. So you can learn more there.
Yes.
Is that it?
I think that's it. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, other than that, people really should join us. But I think, did we cover that?
I think we covered that.
Listeners, did you hear? You should come join us.
I think they got it. I think they understand. I think they get it.
Okay. All right. So, in a little bit, we are going to bring in our interview with Dr. Stephanie Estima. She is awesome. I heard her speak at a conference in January, and she talks, obviously, she's a doctor of chiropractic. She talks a lot about health and well-being and wellness and all these things. And really, really, we get into this idea that health and wellness, obviously isn't just what you eat.
Yeah.
It also extends to your brain health and, obviously your physical health, but your mental health and your mental well-being and your spiritual health and your spiritual well-being and all these things. So Tyson, I thought it would be good to bring in the conversation of self-care, which both of us have a lot of stigma around. So we're going to do our best to eloquently touch on the stigmas and also on the opportunities.
Yes. So there are obviously, just starting off the conversation, there's a lot of different definitions and perspectives of what is self-care. And this is one of the differences that Brie and I carry. And I don't know if they're necessarily differences. I think it's just looking at the same coin from two different perspectives. So we're going to talk about those two perspectives. And I think maybe there's a middle way where both of them are actually the more holistic perspective of self-care. So on the one hand, self-care it originated from doctors telling their patients, like, if you have diabetes, this is how you can self-care at home without the presence of doctors. This is how you can take care of your, condition when you don't have doctors and experts around. And so that still lies true, where I think self-care is very much the need to take good care of the container called the human body.
Which I think is such an incredibly important conversation, especially right now, as everything is changing about our healthcare system and our access to, doctors and medicine and like all these things, as all these things are really, really under scrutiny. I mean, this is such a huge conversation happening right now. I think that our abilities to take our health and our care into our own hands is paramount right now. Like, stop relying on this system that is kind of in place to keep you broken and start taking it into your own hands. How can you, like Tice was saying, sorry, I totally just got distracted by a noise.
Fish syndrome.
I know, right? Look,
Well,
a squirrel.
I will add that, the medical system, no matter where you are in the world, is there for you for when you're sick. And it's supposed to be, is what I'm trying to get at. Supposed to be, sometimes it's not, but it's supposed to be there for you when you're sick, when you're at a negative, when you're operating from a place where you cannot function anymore without additional support. And science and the medical industry have come a long way in terms of its technologies, in its ability to support you when you're at a zero and a negative. The challenge is that there's an illusion that our medical system can help us thrive. And I don't see that being the case. Seeing that.
Yeah, not in the way that it currently exists.
Right. So what I'm seeing,
or at least
is
in America, I should say. This is not to say, I mean, I'm not aware of the medical systems in other countries, but in America,
right.
This is,
Right. So if we're looking to thrive, we've got to look outside of the medical industry. And I think that that's fine. I think that that's okay, that we have other systems that we can rely on to go from that 0 to that 10, to that flourishing. Okay. So if you have depression, if you have debilitating anxiety, if you have, suicidal thoughts, if you're so foggy, so lost, if you have a mental disability, a mental challenge, a physical disability, please take care of yourself by leaning on the systems that were built to support you. And I know that we have frustrations around a medical system, and this is not the conversation for that today, but that's what it's there for, okay? So I'm not saying don't take antidepressants. We need medication when we need it. And then once we're at that set point, once we're at that 0, it's important to start honoring and practicing self-care to prevent ourselves from going back to the 0 or the negative mark. So preventative medicine, but also to flourish, right? Also to, okay, I'm physically healthy. Now, how can I get to a place where I can prevent diabetes 30 years down the road? How can I prevent heart attacks, 50 years down the road? How can I prevent those things by taking care of the self? So I think from one perspective, self-care really looks like physical exercise, movement, meditation for the brain, more of the overt external ways that we take care of our beingness so we can show up in the world in a bigger way.
And this isn't to say you can't rely on professionals in this conversation as well. A lot of my self-care practices involve acupuncturists and chiropractics and, some of these other things, but a lot of those modalities and the modalities that Tice just mentioned, I see them and I see self-care as more of a marathon. Our medical industry, in terms of going to the doctor when you have the flu or a cough or an upset stomach, things like that, are more of a sprint. Whereas the things that we're talking about are more of that longevity thing, that building
That's
a solid foundation.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So
I love my metaphors.
Yeah, I know you did good. But from that perspective, it's obvious to see that self-care is important for everybody. And it's not indulgent. It's not, it could be selfish, right? It could be, but the inherent theme of it is not selfish. The need for you to make sure that you have a good physical body to move around is what's going to allow you to then take care of your children, take care of your responsibilities. So from this perspective, self-care is actually absolutely a radical revolutionary act, especially for women who have been taught to put everyone else's needs above our own. And so we're constantly running around depleted, worrying about what other people are thinking, and we're never feeling whole. We're never feeling good enough. We're never feeling worthy because we're so bent out of shape on making sure that everybody else is fulfilled. And this is a huge topic that we support our women in the Amplified Woman 6-month program. And we're still, even though we're halfway through the program now, we are still touching base on the importance of self-care because it's so easy to forget it.
Absolutely. And I would say too, if you are listening to this podcast, you are someone in the world that is, one, either doing big things or two, wants to. We don't get people listening to this podcast that just want to eat potato chips on their couch, even though there's a time and place for that as well. But if you are listening to this podcast, you're doing big shit in the world. And if you are doing big shit in the world, you have got to take care of yourself. Because if there is no self, there is no big shit. Yeah. You have to come first. You just have to, because if there isn't you, then the work that you are here to do in the world, the change you're here to make, the impact you're willing or that you're here to create is not going to happen without you. It's just not. So if you're not taking care of yourself, you're literally robbing the world of your gifts and of your ability to make things happen.
Yeah. So there's a couple things that I want to make sure that we touch on, and I want to say them right now. We don't have to say it right now, but just so that I don't forget. One, I know that most of us know that self-care is important. So why don't we do it? I think that's a big one.
Ooh, good.
And two, how do we remove the guilt around self-care? Is the other big one. But I do want to add one more. So if we can be very clear that self-care is part of self-care is the importance of taking care of the physical body, our, exercise regimen, our diet regimen, right? How much time we're giving ourselves to disconnect. Those are all important, de-stress, that's body stuff. Then there's also an importance of the mind stuff. And so to me, I view self-care as also the importance of doing a check on our psyche. Are we stressed? Are we anxious? Are we overwhelmed all the time? How can we take care of that? How can we support that and create systems to support that? Where can we do the internal healing of any wounds and trauma that is perpetuating the stress signals and the fight-flight response so that we can decompress? Because I find that a lot of times we have a hard time decompressing. We have a hard time disconnecting. And much of that is because we're afraid to disconnect, because the minute we slow down, all of our thoughts catch up with us, and we're bombarded with thoughts of how much we hate ourselves and angst and terror. And so then we're not going to meditate. We're not going to slow down. And
Well, and
slowing down is so important.
even that idea of slowing down, I remember talking to someone and being like, okay, so, start this relaxation practice. And they're like, okay, how? How do I relax?
Yeah.
Like how
Yeah.
do I just shut off? How do
Yeah.
I not think about things and not stress out and not do this
Yeah.
and not do this and all these things? And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
And Bree and I, we have a lot of ways that we can tell you all how to self-care based on what we do. And we can definitely share some of that experience. But I think the most important thing to remember is you've got to figure out what feels good for you.
Yeah.
Like for me, watching a documentary on Netflix, oh, it's 11:11. Oh, it's 11:11.
Everybody make a wish.
Everybody make a wish.
It still counts even though that you're listening to this later.
Like for me, watching a Netflix documentary, there's one called Hot Girls Wanted on Netflix. It's really good. To me, that's a way I decompress. To me, that is self-care. To some people, watching Netflix, watching TV is a way they numb themselves, and the way that they kind of fake stop thinking, but from a place of not getting overwhelmed, right? Like, yeah. So
that's what I do. When I watch Netflix, it's very much just like a shutting down process. It's not like, it's not a filling up process.
Right.
So for me,
ooh, that's good. Ooh, pause. There we go. So for all of you that are practicing self-care, really start to notice if the activity that you're doing is filling you up or it's numbing you out, because that's the point of self-care. It's supposed to be able to fill your cup back up. Okay, go ahead.
And that's, I think the biggest point that I wanted to make in this as well is that it doesn't fucking matter what you do. Like whether it's, doing yoga or doing meditation or taking a walk or loving on your animal or, whatever it is, like whatever that thing is doesn't fucking matter. What matters is why you're doing it. And why you're doing it is to fill up that energy reserve so that you have enough capacity to hold space for other people to do big things in the world, blah, blah, blah. And so, like Tice said, you have to know what that is for you. And you might not know that today. You might not know it tomorrow. But the invitation is try some shit out. Like go do a bunch of shit and see how it feels. Does it feel good? Does it not feel good? Are you numbing out? Are you relaxing? Like assess all the different things. I just tried, we haven't talked about this yet, Tice, but I just tried a new self-care thing this week.
Oh yeah?
I floated. Is that I floated? I float?
Yeah, you like went into a float tank?
Yeah. Fascinating stuff. See, so for Tice, the documentary thing works. For me, self-care is a lot about like being alone and just being in my own space and allowing, universal energy to kind of like support me and just be in that kind of surrender place, which by the way, you have to surrender when you're floating. Yes. Otherwise, I there was one part of my body that did not surrender. And I woke up the next day with a huge fucking like neck pain. Couldn't turn my head in one direction. It was very unfortunate.
Yeah. And self-care doesn't have to be fancy. It can just be a moment-to-moment check-in and a moment-to-moment experience. So I do want to talk about why is it so hard? If we all know that self-care is important, why is it so hard for us to do it? And I do want to share for me, mental self-care is very easy for me. I know how to support myself mentally. I have the support systems to support me mentally. I'm very well emotionally taken care of, which hasn't always been the case, but I've made more and more of a priority and an effort to make that so and to feel a sense of stability through my mental well-being. But my physical well-being, I have a real hard time with. And I just had a conversation with my client today who was like, how do I make it more important in my life? Because I know it's important, but I just don't do it. And I'm like, I am right there with you. I know that more movement and better diet is important in my life. And I know the consequences of not taking better care of my physical body, but oh my God, I can't be bothered. I can't. People are like, you gotta, do this. I'm like, no, I know what I gotta do. Like, I'm very well aware of what I gotta do. And like literally cannot be bothered to do them. Like, I'm not willing to spend another minute in my kitchen, let alone 2 hours cooking a dinner. No, thank you. No, no.
So was just talking about this morning with my accountability group. I am going to go get stickers when I get back to LA, because one of the things that is really important for my self-care is visualization and meditation. And I know when I do these two things consistently, I fucking make magic happen. And for the last like few months, it's been a struggle. It's
Yeah.
been hard for me to commit to those things on a daily basis. So I'm going to go get stickers. And
Is that going to be your
I have,
system?
you know how I got us those big wall calendars?
Yeah, I love
your
mine.
wall calendars.
Yeah.
So mine hangs in my bedroom next to my altar where I meditate. And I'm going to get stickers. And every day that I meditate, I get a sticker. And every day that I visualize, I get a sticker. And I am going to start just a silly, stupid. Remember when you were little and you got stickers on your chore thing?
Oh yeah, no, I got stickers for, I mean, I had a board for my chores, and if I did the chore, I got a sticker, and then my
Yep.
parents would count it out, and I would get allowance every week.
Reward system.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I mean, they do say that reward systems is psychologically the best way to create a new habit, which is great. I don't know what my award system is. Maybe that's what I have to think about, like what my award system is. I also understand for many of us that may be listening, exercise and movement can be so challenging when it's so bloody expensive. Holy shit, Stokey. Like, it's not only expensive, it requires you to drive, like, here in LA at least.
You have to leave your house.
Yeah, you have to leave your house, damn it. You have to leave your house, you have to get in a car, you have to find parking, you have to pay for the gym. It's
You
just
put pants on.
Sister, let me tell you what, pants and I. So I understand. I hear you. I hear the challenges because I'm right there with you. And I think the answer is, how can we make it fun? And it sounds like your sticker system is a way that you're making that fun for you. It's like, how can you make it fun until it is fun in and of itself?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm honest. That's what I'm juggling with self-care, and I literally don't have an answer.
You just need to throw more spaghetti against the wall, Tice. That is so much fun.
So fun. And Mark and I have big goals, like, oh, we'll go yogaing together. We don't, because it's the weekend and we're tired and we just want to, although we do go on hikes together. So, also what I suggested to my client is, so she's doing this thing right now where, she's practicing disconnecting from her phone. And so every time she reaches for her phone, instead she asks herself, what do I actually need in this moment? And so I encouraged her, well, since you're already doing that, why not, as you're honoring what you need, you also move. Stand up, go up and down the stairs, take a walk around the block, do a few squats, do a few lunges. Like, what if instead of thinking that it has to be this hour-long spectacle of physical self-care, it can be just incorporating more small movements throughout your day?
Yeah, baby steps, I think, is a really great way to ease into things. I remember when I was first getting started with my morning practice, and the idea of like, it had to be an hour and it had to include these 6 things and it had to look like this, 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 and this. And if I stayed in bed for an extra 3 minutes, I was like, well, fuck it. I can't do the whole hour. So might as well just not do it at all. And so I ended up starting with just like a 5-minute meditation. And that was my morning routine. And then, slowly, gradually built upon it. So Tice, maybe start with like filling up the water container. That can be your ease into cooking.
Oh my God. I don't know what I'm going to do about me and cooking, Brie. I don't know. I do not know what to do. Everyone has advice. Everyone has good intentions for my life. I honor you. I get it. And I literally cannot be bothered. Listen, I so can't be bothered that if my vegetables don't already come pre-chopped, I'm not going to eat them. Like, this is how much I literally can't be bothered. And people are like, well, your kitchen isn't big enough, sexy enough. I'm like, okay, oh, what? You're going to build me a better kitchen? Like, what is the proposition here? So I guess I'm lamenting that we're all in this experience of self-care together.
It is true.
And for those of us who say, that self-care is selfish, it is in some ways if it's done in that way, right? Just as Bree said, get clear on that why. If you're self-caring because you're trying to remove responsibility that's actually required of you, if you're doing it out of spite for somebody else, right? It's that energy, that intention creates that impact. And so self-care can be selfish if it's done selfishly. And it's the most selfless act if it's done selflessly. If we are to continue to, rise up against this political regime, and if we're to continue to rise up in our careers, if we're continue to rise up for our children and to rise up for our jobs and, rise up for our people in our lives, then it's important that we honor ourselves. But if it's coming at the expense of other people's well-beings, then that's time to check yourself,
Yeah.
because that's not the point of this whole thing.
Yeah, the way I like to think about it is I'm literally doing the people in my life a disservice by not self-caring.
Yeah.
Because if I can't show up with my full heart, with my full authenticity, from a place of wholeness in my relationships, in my business, in every aspect of my life, then I am doing everyone around me and my business and my life a complete disservice.
Totally. Yeah, so we got to find that balance. It's not black or white. There's time for self-care. There's time to show up. There's time to retreat. There's time to expand. And, I don't believe that it's always appropriate time to self-care. Sometimes it's important to take care of somebody else. And then sometimes it's important to put your needs first. So it's not always the case that you have to put the oxygen mask on yourself first before other people. That metaphor, I feel like it's overused, and that's not always appropriate. It is not always appropriate. So self-care, like anything else that we share here on the podcast, is a nuanced conversation that requires commitment to really asking yourself, what's really here? What am I running away from doing this? Am I Netflixing to not be with my partner, for example? Am I using this as an escape to not deal with a challenge in a relationship? If that's the case, maybe there's a better way that I can take care of myself so I can show up better for the relationship.
Yeah.
So,
well,
all right,
awesome.
see, we got through this conversation pretty nicely. Look at
I
us.
think we deserve a reward, Tice. What is going to be our reward?
Chocolate chip cookie is
For
my
you.
reward always.
And for me?
You can have an ice cube.
Woo! Ice cube.
Brie can't eat much of things right now, so ice cube seems like a safe, foolproof snack.
Bubbly water. That's my reward. I get bubbly water.
Ooh, are you gonna put lemon or lime in? Are we gonna go that level of dessert? Okay.
I don't have any citrus in the house.
Oh boy.
I know. But all right, well, let's tell everyone about how amazing Breather is, and then bring on Dr. Stephanie, who is going to talk about even more self-care practices, including why us as women should all be having loads more sex.
Let's do it. Even the best offices can't meet every need. Sometimes you need a huge conference room, sometimes you need a quiet nook, sometimes you need to be in London for a meeting tomorrow, and sometimes you find out last minute that the attendance for your meeting happening in 2 hours isn't 3 people, it's 30. Take a deep breath, because Breather has you covered.
Breather has solutions to all of your booking nightmares with beautiful, inspiring workspaces for your offsites, team meetings, client meetings, or even individual work. Breather gives you access to professional workspaces without the overhead and without the commitment.
The best part? You only pay for the time you need. Whether it's a month, a day, or even just an hour, there are no minimums.
Get the right workspace when you need it, where you need it. Breather has locations in LA, New York, San Francisco, Palo Alto, Boston, Chicago, DC, Toronto, Montreal, and London, with more being added.
Don't overpay for space you don't need. Book a Breather space just for the time you need it and spend hundreds instead of thousands.
Go to breather.com to gain access to the extensive network of workspaces and book instantly. Whether you're a Fortune 500 company or a solopreneur, Breather has the perfect space for you. Oh, amplifiers, yet another epic guest for you today. Go ahead.
No, Brie, go ahead. It's your show. No, it's fine. No, please.
We are joined today by Stephanie Estima. So,
like Self-Esteem.
Dr. Stephanie is a chiropractor and functional neurologist in private practice in Toronto, Canada. Her epic mission, or moonshot, is to educate people on the four main pillars of health. The foundation of that is brain health, nutrition, fitness, and mindset. So we are going to dive into some really cool kind of scientific things, which we haven't really done yet on this podcast. So welcome, Dr. Stephanie.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
So we like to start off our show by asking our guests the same question. So I'll ask you that question, which is, what does it look like for you to live an amplified life?
It's a great question. I think if I could boil it down very simply, it would be to find in every facet of your life to be living in alignment. And being a chiropractor, alignment is one of my most favorite words in the English dictionary, but I'm talking about physical alignment. Absolutely. I'm talking about emotional alignment. I'm talking about spiritual alignment. I'm talking about relationship alignment, alignment in your family and your friends, your personal, your work life. So, a lot of, one of the things that I often find in practice is people come in with issues of physical misalignment. They may come in with, back pain or neck pain or other things that you would maybe typically think a chiropractor can help with. And when you dig a little deeper, what often happens is we find that there is not only the symptomatic presentation of physical misalignment, but we also have things like emotional misalignment, spiritual misalignment. So these things affect our brain and the way that we process things and our moods and our energy levels and our productivity and our focus and our creativity, to the point where if you are living a life that is misaligned, your body is eventually going to scream at you, and it's usually in the form of a physical symptom, which is where most people find themselves in the office of a chiropractor. But I do my best work when I am finding ways for both my practice members in my practice, but also in my own life, finding ways that I live in alignment. So one of the biggest ways that's happened for me personally in the last year has been my love relationship, and finding some wonderful alignment there.
What was that process for you? Because as someone who is also in the process of coming into alignment in a love relationship.
Oh my gosh.
I have to ask. We have a professional here.
Bree will jump at any opportunity to ask our guests if it helps in the relationship front.
Right? Well, we're going to get to some other fronts in a little bit as well with Dr. Stephanie. But so what was it? What was that thing, that key piece of alignment that you really found and came into in order to shift your external world?
That's a great question. I think, I would probably say my past experience has been a very good indicator of when I have not been in alignment. And sometimes when you have a template for what's not going right, when you see something that is going right, or you see something that is right in front of you, it's much easier to identify, right? Like I'm sure Tice and Bree, have you ever been in a relationship, personal or work-wise, where you haven't been in alignment?
Oh, of course.
Hell yes, right? Like yes,
no, all of my relationships are perfect. I don't understand.
Okay, so this is more for Bree then, because but when you are misaligned, whether that is in a love relationship or otherwise, there's a cascade of events physiological events that happen in the body, and it's primarily mediated by a hormone called cortisol. So cortisol is our stress hormone. Have you ever heard of the term fight or flight? Fight or flight. So when you are misaligned emotionally in your love relationship, you are constantly in a state of stress, because we can always be civil to each other, even though we might not necessarily like each other. And if you are if this happens over the long term, the what we call your sympathetic nervous system, or basically the nervous system that's responsible for mediating a stress response, is going to get jacked, and it's going to get fatigued over time. So for me, I was in a long-term relationship prior to my current one, and it was over the course of time, it became apparent that it wasn't an aligned relationship, and there was evidence of that everywhere, both in my own health and in just the dynamic between myself and my partner. So sometimes, and I can speak for myself personally, and hopefully this is some of the women in your tribe can also speak to this as well. Sometimes having an example of what you don't want is a really great way for you to identify when something really great comes along. And another, if that isn't the case for you, if you haven't had, a toxic or a relationship that you weren't aligned in, a really great exercise for finding what might potentially be an aligned relationship for you is actually writing out all the things that you like about, or all the dream things that you would love in a dream partner, right? Most of us have, you both are entrepreneurs, you have a business that you run, and you've probably written out your mission, your vision, your purpose statement, the reason why your business exists, the catalyzing statement, all those things that we do in our business. But often we don't actually do that in our own personal relationships, which are the foundation for whether or not we're going to be successful or not, our satisfaction in life, and all those kinds of things. So I would say, if you sort of two ways. So, for me, I had a relationship that wasn't aligned. And then when I came and I met the person that I'm in a relationship with now, I knew instantly that there was instant alignment there. So that is one way for you to identify how to get into alignment. And the other way is, if you haven't had that experience before, to give you that template, then I would say define your own template. Make up what it is that you want in a dream partner.
So Bree's going to obviously go now and create a mission statement for her dream partner.
Mm-hmm.
I know Bree. This is exactly what she will do.
And
I will hear about it tomorrow. That's amazing. So, okay, let's rewind a hot minute, because I know that this is something that you do. So we tend to just make a lot of assumptions, but let's assume that somebody doesn't understand the relationship between our physical body and our mental state, right? What would you say to them? Like, how is it that, let's say, my sciatica is correlated to my stress level? Like, how is that connection possible?
Well, I think it really comes down to understanding how the brain works. And you don't necessarily need to be a neurologist or, someone with a professional degree. If I were to ask you both, like, what's the most important organ in the body? What would you say? Don't say heart.
I mean, probably heart.
I was going to say brain or skin.
Yeah, brain. It's your brain. Your brain.
Obviously, Bree. See, brain.
Obviously, right? And you're perfect, Ty. We've already established that.
I love Dr. Stephanie so much right now.
The brain is our master organ, right? So it controls absolutely everything in the body, every single neurological process, every single cell, tissue, organ, gland, everything. Your brain controls. And one of the reasons how we know that it's the most important organ in the body is it's the only one that's completely encased in bone, right? So having an understanding and a respect for the brain is a very easy way to make that connection between physical misalignment and emotional misalignment. Like, healthy brains don't have leaky guts. Healthy brains are not depressed. Healthy brains don't have sciatica. So there's a very intimate relationship between the health and the neurology and the relay system that we have in our brains and that which our body expresses. Our bodies is truly just an expression of the health of our brain.
There was an article that just came out about newer revelations of what happens with the brain during sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard of this, Stephanie? It's something, I'm sure you have. It's something about how the brain cells actually get smaller so that the fluid in the brain can release the toxins, and something I should have obviously read the article maybe before just bringing it into our podcast interview. I read the headline, and it's just the more and more scientific research is understanding the importance of sleep and brain cycle and brain health in terms of its relationship with our physical body. Anyway, I just thought that was really cool.
That's beautiful. And when we're talking about in the context of relationships, one of the things I would say to that is if you're trying, if you're tired and you are, beyond bagged because you haven't had a restful sleep, there's so many easy hacks and easy, tips and tricks to, help with a restful sleep. So one of those things would be get rid of the television in your room. Don't look at your phone right before bedtime, and try to wake up with light in the room. So yeah, to your point, absolutely, sleep is a big modifier or a big factor in the health of our brains. You need sleep to be able to regenerate. There's a lot of things that happen while we rest. We want to make sure that the environment in which we rest in is calming and soothing for us to be able to regenerate. So like no phones, charge your phone in the freaking living room. Like get it at, like a lot of people are like, oh, it's my alarm. It's like, buy an $8 alarm, get the phone out of the room, get the TV out of the room, and connect with your partner if there's one who's sleeping beside you, or create healthy habits.
Or breeze cats. It's totally fine.
Yeah, or cats. I mean, whatever. Whatever.
I just started this habit, actually. I used to sleep with my phone next to my bed, and just moved it into the kitchen, and it and my watch both go, charging in their little station in the kitchen.
Good
and
girl.
I still have my alarm on my phone. And the brilliant thing is that, in addition to my cats screaming to feed them, forces me to get out of bed because I have to go into the kitchen to turn my alarm off. And it's
Amazing.
really changed a lot in my life.
And further, you also get rid of the electromagnetic radiation and the frequencies that are right beside your brain when the thing is like charging on your nightstand, right?
Yeah, exactly. Which is part of the reason I did it in the first place.
Good girl.
So I want to ask you, so you mentioned that when we are in toxic relationships, our cortisol levels start getting all screwy, and, we get super stressed and all these things. Is there something that people can start doing, or how do we start shifting our cortisol levels back to a normal level, kind of diminishing that fight or flight response, even if, say, we're still maybe in a toxic relationship, or, are in the process of transitioning out of one?
This is a great question. And this maybe will also feed into your podcast last week with Natalie around ending a relationship. I think for the first and foremost is, the way that we communicate with each other. If you are in a relationship, 55% of the way that you of the words communicated are through body language, 38% is tone, and 7% is actually the words that we use. So when we are, I think a lot of us, men and women alike, I think we really do have to master the art of tone. If I say to you, Bree, what are you doing? Versus, Bree, what are you doing? Right? Like, I'm using the same words, right? It's the same words that I've used to communicate with you, but the tone is very different, and the messaging is very different. So I think mastering the art of tone and understanding that the way that we speak is often more important than what we're saying. I think that is important. If you are in a relationship that is, not serving you in the long term, sometimes it's important for us to change. Like maybe the answer is that you do need to leave that relationship. But if there is any possibility for it to be salvaged, sometimes it's not necessarily that the environment needs to change, but it's our perception of the environment. So gratitude, things like practicing gratitude every single day is very, very, it's not just like airy fairy woo woo stuff, even though that's all good. The neurophysiology, when we are in gratitude, when we are practicing gratitude, we actually come out of our primitive brain. So we have sort of like this like primitive brain, and then the cortex, where we think and make decisions, and what makes us human. We actually come out of that primitive brain and into higher levels of our brain when we are practicing love and gratitude for things around us. And I think I've heard Oprah, it might have been Oprah who said it, or Tim Ferriss, or maybe both of them. They were saying that, there's only two real emotions. It's fear and love. So you are either acting out of fear, which can look like, jealousy, anger, rage, mistrust, or you are acting out of a place of love, which is more neocortex, higher brain, which is, love, appreciation, acceptance, these kinds of things. So I would say certainly mastering the art of communication in terms of the way that we speak and the way that we are trying to communicate our messaging can often help shape the environment around us and the way that people respond to us. And I would say practicing gratitude on the daily is, it should be one of those things like brushing your teeth. Like, did you brush your teeth today? Of course. Did you practice gratitude? Of course.
What about practicing gratitude while you're brushing your teeth? I mean, guys, great habits.
This is efficiency at its finest, isn't it?
Oh my God. Women are the best multitaskers. The best.
Oh my gosh.
So I want to switch over into a different chemical in our brains that I heard you talk about at the Archangel thing, because what Tice doesn't know is that I have actively been applying some of your techniques. That you
yeah. Brie, after she came back from Archangel, was like, I'm doing stuff on you and I'm not telling you what it is. And that was like 5 months ago and I've completely forgotten. Oh yeah.
Yes. So you're about to learn. So let's talk, I believe, was it dopamine or serotonin? Or both?
Both of them. Yeah, both of them. So we have two, this is kind of like neuroscience 101 here. So there's two main neurotransmitters, which are basically hormones that live in the brain that are responsible for our happiness, our motivation. Those are serotonin and dopamine. So dopamine lives in the left. So we have like two sides of our brain, right brain, left brain. The dopamine tends to hang out in the left side of our brain. It's a left brain neurotransmitter. And dopamine is involved in, keeping us, engaged and passionate about what we're doing, motivated to complete tasks. And I should also just like back up 1 minute. The left brain, where dopamine lives, in and of itself, the left brain tends to be more analytic, more linear, more strategic, more mathematical, and we tend to call the left brain more male in its qualities. And that's not to say that women can't be linear and mathematical and strategic, but this tends to be this is just what it tends to be more of a male dominant qualities. And serotonin lives in the right side of the brain. So the right side of the brain tends to be more, creative, emotive, sensual, passionate. And serotonin is a right brain neurotransmitter, which is a hormone in the brain that lives on the right side of the brain. So the two have a very intimate relationship with each other. When you are motivated to complete something, your dopamine levels have to be high in order to be able to complete, to be able to follow through on a task. So that can be, finishing up a degree, taking a new course. It could be, putting together a bookshelf from IKEA, whatever it is. You have to have a high level of dopamine to follow through on that. So internally, if I'm motivated and engaged and passionate about something, I can raise my own levels of dopamine. Serotonin, however, and this is a game changer, I can't raise my own levels of serotonin. Serotonin it increases when I receive positive feedback from my environment, my external environment. So, Brie, you saying, wow, I love Dr. Stephanie. That is positive feedback for me. So my serotonin levels lift up, and that's my right brain activity going up. And that in turn will lift up my dopamine levels. So, to use a simple example, when you said, I love Dr. Stephanie, she's the best. I received positive feedback from you. So my right brain, my serotonin levels go up. That feeds my dopamine levels, which is my motivation. And now I'm way more motivated to give you a better interview so that your podcast is better. You see how that works? I raise my own dopamine, but you have to raise my serotonin levels. So when we look at this in the context of relationships, this is where it gets really interesting, because women, we are more serotonergic in nature, meaning that we tend to be more right-brained, we tend to be more creative, more passionate, more sensual, more emotive. However, we have 50% less, half of the amount of serotonin receptors in our brain than our male counterparts do. So what that means is that we need twice as much, because we have half, We need twice as much positive feedback from our external environment, because that's how serotonin gets raised. And in the context of relationships, we need twice as much feedback from our partner, from our lover, from our husband, from our boyfriend, from our whatever, than our male counterparts do. And I think that this is sometimes where some of the friction can happen between men and women, because we often have a left brain talking to a right brain. When the man is, trying to have you ever seen that YouTube video with the woman with the nail in her head? Have you guys ever seen that?
No.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So all the Amplify Collective listeners and you guys as well, like after this podcast is done, just Google like couple woman with a nail in her head. And this actually exemplifies what I'm telling, like what I'm explaining to a T. There's a woman literally sitting on the couch. She has a big honking nail sticking out of her forehead. And she's saying, but it hurts so much. Yeah. Oh, sorry. It's called, It's Not About the Nail. That's the name of the YouTube video. It's Not About the Nail. So she has this nail on her forehead and she's like, it hurts so much. Oh my gosh, I can feel it all the time. And, and so the guy is like looking at her like she's crazy. And it's like, but it's because you have a nail on your head. Like if you just took out the nail, like if I could just fix this for you, I could just make this go away. And she's like, it's not, I just don't want you to fix it. I just want to talk about how I feel about it. Like it just makes me feel this way. So it's such a beautiful example of how sometimes we can go awry in relationships because you have a emotive, creative, sensual, passionate, woman. We'll use that as an example, wanting to emote and talk about her feelings because women are much stronger in language anyway, to a man or a male counterpart who just wants to fix it, right? They have high levels of dopamine, so they are motivated and passionate and engaged. They just want to like check things off of their to-do list. So oftentimes, like I was saying, we have serotonin. We need twice as much encouragement from our men than our male counterparts do, and they often don't understand that. And when we, if I can like take this one step further and bring this into the into talking about sex, let's talk about sex, baby, right?
Sorry, Mom.
Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about all the good things. Okay, anyway. So, when we talk about sex, this is, you can't really talk about having a good relationship, a great relationship, an epic relationship without talking about having a really awesome sex life. And this is where, when we are in a sexual relationship with somebody, sex is where all the walls come down, right? Like you're the most vulnerable, you're the most, open and exposed, when you're naked with someone, versus any other time. So when we talked about this at Archangel, Brie, and I asked the audience, I said, when we think about this, who needs the sex? When we think about it in the context of relationships, who needs the sex more, men or women? And what would you, Brie, the answer, but what would you say, Tice, if I said to you, who needs sex more? Do you think men need sex more or women need sex more?
From what I'm hearing, I'd say women need sex more because they need that validation.
That's right. Exactly right. Very good. So it's not,
do I get an A? Do I pass the test?
Yes, you get an A.
All the external validation to you, Tice.
You get lots of serotonin here because you're absolutely right. It's the women who need the sex more than the men do, because we need that positive feedback in order to drive up our serotonin levels. And then what happens when the serotonin gets high is the dopamine gets high for us as well. So then we're motivated to be a better partner, a better lover, a better wife, a better girlfriend, a better whatever. And, I think that if you are, as a man, and sometimes this is hard to hear as a man as well, because like, oh, for fuck's sakes, what else do I have? Oh, sorry. Was I allowed to say that?
Oh yeah, yes. We're rated explicit.
Sorry.
Swear away.
You can edit that out.
Swear away.
No, we cuss all the fucking time.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so a lot of guys like, okay, what else do I need to do? But if a man is paying attention and honoring and cherishing his woman and making her feel safe and allowing her to fully express who she is going to chase that sex like the animal that she is, because she is going to want to be getting that positive feedback from him. And that's going to drive up her motivation levels to be, to have more sex, to be a better lover, to do all the things that, make a relationship awesome.
So I do want to add just one little thing. Oh, Brie, what?
To circle back around, what I have been doing for Tice
Oh, right.
is not the sex part of this conversation, just in case anyone was wondering, but more about the positive reinforcement stuff. So it was like right after I saw Dr. Stephanie speak, something had happened and I don't know what it was. And Tice did something. And so I made sure to send her a text that said, I just really want to let you know how grateful I am that you do this and that you take charge on this and that it really means a lot to me, and thank you. Like, you are really integral in this partnership, or something along those lines.
Actually, I remember you telling me that we had taken the picture and we were walking
Yep.
back inside and you're like, I just texted my partner and I let her know how much. And I think that's great. Like, this is not just applicable to personal love relationships or sexual relationships. I think this also applies to women in business, because women in business are different than men are in business. And it's the same kind of thing. We need that external validation because we don't have the amount of serotonin receptors that we do in our brain. So I love that you did that. That's a wonderful application of it.
And oddly enough, like, Tice does it to me. She just messaged me, I think it was Thursday or Friday or something, and said, I just want to let you know that I love that you take care of this, or that you do this for the business, and it means a lot to me. So yeah, it's something that, as listeners, you guys can start practicing in all areas of your life. And if you have someone in your life that you need more external validation from too, you can let them know that. Like, Tice and I communicate a lot about what we need in our relationship with one another. So just as an offering, if you would like to raise your serotonin levels more, some great opportunities to do so.
Yeah, and I just want to add just a quick thing. Like, what do you think, Dr. Stephanie, is the difference, or is there a difference between kind of external validation, which I know can get very dangerous? And, I do a lot of work with my women around worthiness, and a lot of women's unworthiness stems from a deep need to be validated and to be seen as valid in the world. I guess I just defined validation. Okay. Or, this need and desire for positive feedback. Like, what would you say is the line, or is there a line, and what does that look like? Because if we have lower serotonin levels and we relish external validation, it's so easy then to see why we would get hooked into that and then feel like we need that in order to thrive. So I'd just like for you to talk a little bit about those two things.
Sure. I think what we're talking about, you're making a really great point, and this can extend to why people are addicted to social media and all of these sorts of things. What you're talking more about there is self-esteem. And this comes down to what's coming up for me while you're talking about this is what agreements, what subconscious agreements we've made with ourselves through, from growing up with, our mothers, fathers, teachers, preachers, some of the things that we've learned growing up about ourselves. You often will hear people talking about, if you've ever been in a grocery store and you hear someone a mom who's frustrated with their kids or something, and she'll be like, okay, that's a really good boy. Be a good boy. Don't do that. Be a good boy. And we make these unconscious agreements about our self-worth and our self-validation as we're growing up. And then as we grow up, we keep these agreements, these stories that we've learned about ourselves. And I think that becomes more of a self-esteem issue. And we get into things like inner critic and having our inner critic telling us constantly that we're not worthy enough, not good enough, not smart enough, not pretty enough, not whatever enough. So I do think that there needs to be a conscious awareness around when you are being needy because of a unmet or unfulfilled, and I don't say needy in a derogatory term. I mean, you feel like you need some sort of external validation because you can't find it within yourself, versus the neurological need from as a female partner in the relationship to get positive reinforcement from your partner. That doesn't mean that your partner is walking around all day and saying, "Oh my gosh, so good, you took 10 steps, that's amazing," and "Oh my gosh, that's so good, you chose really good food today, good for you." It's not about that. It's about really finding what the core values are from the woman and reinforcing those things for her and making her feel safe to be the fullest expression of who she is. Now, all of us have, we're all, part of the human race, right? So we're all partially fucked up in some ways, right? We're
all fucked up.
Not you, Tice. I know
right. Oh, obviously, right. Not yet. Yeah. Thank
But we all have issues, self-esteem issues, self-worth issues. We all struggle with that. But becoming consciously aware of when those voices in our heads from our past, mothers, fathers, teachers, preachers, or what I like to call the inner critic, is now taking over the conversation versus the adult version of who you are, or the highest expression, the self-actualized self.
Well, this seems to me very aligned with attachment theory. There are a lot of books and conversations of psychologists seeing how attachment theory is actually very important and applicable in relationships, because in order for you to feel secure in a relationship, you have to have a sense of dependency and a sense of need for each other. And so often in our society, we're taught that you can't need anybody and you can't get any sort of external validation. It all has to come from within. And I love that what you're finding neurologically, and what these psychologists are finding, in this theory, and what we're finding in this conversation, is that we are social creatures. We are constantly monitoring and feeling what's happening on the outside to determine how we respond and feel on the inside. And so there is a need for us to, especially women, to have that validation, to have that sense of safety and being seen in a relationship in order for them to then thrive out into the world. So I feel like bringing that kind of back to full circle. I love that you said this. It's like we need to look for ways in which we're seeking validation because we're feeling unworthy, rather than asking for validation because we want to be seen by our partners, and we need that sense of attachment in our partnerships in order for us to flourish.
Beautifully said.
That's it. That's all I got.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Mic drop. Well, it's crazy to believe this, but we're like at time, which blows my mind. Tice and I chat on the side of our conversations to make sure that the flow is happening. And I'm like, stuff's so fascinating to me. Like I could sit here and talk about all these things all day long. But the good news is you get to hear more of Dr. Stephanie in our private Facebook community.
Yes, we're going to do an extended cut version and ask her some deep, juicy, bra-off questions. So you can check out our extended cut version by joining our Facebook group at www.beamplified.community. And before we wrap up, Dr. Stephanie, please let people know, how can they find you?
Well, if you're in the Toronto area, my clinic is called The Health Loft by Dr. Stephanie. So it's www.thehealthloft.ca. The other thing I can maybe drop for your listeners is an example of gratitude. We talked briefly about gratitude journals. My partner, Giovanni, and I fill out gratitude journals all the time. We actually have a spreadsheet that we both fill out at the same time. And I can, if you go to drstephaniellovesyou.com, you can just download a copy of an example of gratitude that we do every day with each other.
That's awesome.
And we will add that to the show notes for all of you listening, so you can get more of Dr. Stephanie. Estima, like it's self-esteem. I love that. Okay. So extended cut is coming to you now. Stay tuned. Thank you, Dr. Stephanie, for all of the amazing knowledge you dropped for us today.
And as usual, you can find us on all the socials at The Amplify Co. So go be amplified, and we will see y'all next week.